Party of Arkansas will hold its biennial state convention June 8th here in Rogers, Arkansas. Here to talk about what to expect, but also what you need to know is 2nd District Chairman Jennifer Lancaster. Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming up to the studio again.
Hey, Jenny, thanks for having me.
Yes, well, the last time that I had you in studio, we broke down the state committee, and I think that was a really useful tool and a great interview just for people to understand what to expect and what was going to happen at the state committee meeting. And so I wanted to have you back on to talk about the state convention. It is a little over a week away. And there's a lot of moving parts to consider. And the state committee, as we've talked about before, and the state convention are two very different meetings and two very different bodies. And so we're going to put the state committee meeting and information kind of on a shelf right now and only focus on the state convention. So first, just tell us, what is the state convention?
That's a great question. And thank you for doing this series, because I know so many people have reached out to me with questions and wanting to understand this process, and there's just not enough information out there. But Conduit is doing an incredible job about informing the people and giving them the tools that they need to go into the state convention armed with knowledge, because we know that's where our power comes from.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, the convention, it meets every 2 years, and this body is the ultimate authority on all party matters. And I'm actually quoting directly from our RPA rules. First page, Article 1, Section 1, Section B.
Yeah.
And it says that this body, the convention, is the ultimate authority on all party matters. And so people need to understand that this is the body from which all authority flows. So this body, if you are a state delegate member, you actually have more authority within this body than our RPA chairman, than our governor, than any state committee, the rules committee, the state executive committee. This is the ultimate authority. And I think sometimes people forget that, but it is not only in our rules, but it also aligns with our platform and even our state motto. So people need to remember that as we go into the convention. And so you'll often hear things, especially from elected officials, where they say, well, the governor is the head of our party. No, that's not true. It is this body right here. It is the convention. It is the state delegates. And so I hope everybody remembers that as we go into next weekend. Also, what is so unique about this body is that it is most representative of the people. So unlike the state committee that we spoke about during the last video, this body, the convention, nobody gets an automatic seat. So in the state committee, all elected officials get an automatic seat. They don't have to run for it. But that's not true with the convention. And that's one of the things that makes this so beautiful and so exciting, is that within each county, they have their own respective conventions. And then that is where they elect state delegates. So they are choosing, each county is choosing the individuals that they want to send to this state convention to represent their interest. And so that is where you have these people coming together, which is what we're going to do on June 8th. And we're going to vote on issues like platform changes, rules changes. We're going to elect some electors for the presidential and vice presidential nominees. And so we're going to do a lot of really important things. But it appears that there are already some roadblocks that are starting to be thrown up, and hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit.
I do want to talk to you about that. But first, for people who, and I've seen this on Facebook, and so I think this would be good to also outline before we talk about that. I've seen people say, and I love to see new people in the party. It's exciting to see, but I've seen comments, this is my very first state convention. What can I expect? What will it look like? And so if you would, just very briefly, lay out the foundation of what normal practices for the state convention, our rules, the RPA rules. Well, if the RPA rules don't speak to something specific, what comes into play then? What should it normally look like, best practice?
Okay, yeah, great question. So everybody's going to convene at a convention center. It's going to be a huge room that will accommodate probably at least 500 people, I would expect. And they're going to begin with, typically, they'll begin with a ceremony, acknowledging certain people, do some introductory matters, and then we're going to need to follow our RPA rules, which there are certain obligations that are outlined within our RPA rules. And where the RPA rules are silent, that is where we look to Robert's rules. And the convention section is section 58 through 60. And that, if anybody wants to go ahead and read those sections, I would encourage you to do that, because that will outline every step that we as a convention need to follow. And if we don't follow that, well, then we may have some problems. And I will tell you, within Robert's rules, it says that there are 3 things that must be done before the convention body is officially organized. And I have some concerns because the call that was sent out just a couple days ago, it doesn't have us addressing some of those requirements. So we're going to need to make sure that those requirements are met so that our convention is officially called, because not only is this required by our own rules, this is required by state law.
Yeah, talk to us then just briefly about state law and what that looks like. It's Arkansas Code Title VII. And essentially it says both parties are to hold a convention immediately following primaries. So talk to us just briefly about that.
Yes, so there are just a few obligations within the law that the convention must meet, and one of those is to certify our primary candidates. And so that is one of the things that we will be doing, and then we will be electing, as I mentioned, the electors. So those are 2 main things that we have to do during this convention. But again, it's also the opportunity to explore things like changing our party platform, changing rules that we think may need to be changed, and addressing any other issues that are relevant to the party.
You mentioned before we jumped into what the foundation should look like, what things are looking like now, and that there's some hesitation about the upcoming convention. Talk to us about that and what you meant.
So we've seen some changes over the last few conventions, and it certainly seems as though there is an attempt to usurp the authority of this convention. And I don't think that is surprising to anyone in light of recent events. I think people can all agree that within just the last year, the rules changes that have been submitted to the State Executive Committee have all been an attempt to either, 1, consolidate power in the hands of the few elected officials or the RPA, or 2, to grow that power. But what we see, what is different about the convention, and what I think you'll notice, is the convention is where the people, the grassroots people, the people who don't hold any titles and aren't interested in holding any titles, get to come in and say, we want to adjust our platform, which is a statement of our beliefs. And of course, as the world is changing, we want to make sure that that platform reflects our values, because that is what people are going to go to see what it is we believe and who we are. And so you see at the convention, where it's the grassroots folks, they're more concerned about principle, whereas with the state committee, at least over the last year, they've been more focused on just usurping the power of the convention, the people, and consolidating it into the hands of a few.
Yeah, and that is what we saw most recently at the state committee meeting.
Yeah, the last one and the one before that.
Right. We do certainly hope to have a good state convention on June 8th, but like you mentioned, what we've seen so far puts that into question. We've recently written an article, actually several articles about this, but party officials have interpreted a section of Robert Rules of Order, which we can talk about, as only allowing the state convention to consider proposals approved by the committees. Is it correct to say that this is something new, that this has never happened before, to your knowledge, regarding state conventions?
Yes, it absolutely is inaccurate. It is a misinterpretation of the rules. And it is, again, just another attempt to usurp the authority of this body, of the convention, and the delegates that will be there. Ultimately, what we're seeing is just this power struggle between the people and the elected officials, and of course, the elected officials wanting to retain their authority and grow it. So to answer your question, yes, that is what we're seeing.
And an article that I want to point our viewers to, it's called RPA Delegates Need to Know. And we walk this through. First, we introduce in a series of articles proposals that were sent in regarding the platform, rules changes, and then one sole resolution. We're going to break those down just briefly in a second. But then we also wrote an article entitled Delegates Need to Know that what party officials are saying. We do know that, someone sent in a response or, inquiring about this, and the party chair and the committee chairs were all on the same page in agreement saying these will not be heard according to the rules. But again, are they working with a different set of rules?
Yes, they are. So the rule that was cited in those email exchanges was not even within the convention sections that I referenced earlier. So again, when you go to Robert's Rules, first we look to our RPA rules. And so after you've gone through the RPA rules and anything that addresses convention procedure, if there is a matter that is silent, then you go to Robert's Rules. And the section within Robert's Rules that everyone needs to be referencing is section 58 through 60. However, within that email exchange, the basis for not allowing the body to hear certain rules and platform proposals that were timely submitted, they are using a rule under a completely different section that deals with special meetings. And so that's not even a section that we should be looking at. We're looking at conventions. Additionally, I would say that not only are they looking at the wrong section, and I want to expound on that before I move on.
Mm-hmm.
I think historically this happens. I don't think it is very uncommon for us to be told something and for certain people to use certain rules or even the law as a basis, and it's misinterpreted or it's not shared with us in the correct manner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is why it is so important that everybody does their research and that they watch these videos, they read the rules, they scrutinize the call, compare it to the section, Robert's Rules, section 58 through 60, because it actually gives you an outline of what you should expect an agenda to look like at a convention. So I would encourage people not just to listen to what I'm saying or what anyone's saying, but take these resources and actually go and do your own research, because the information that is always being put out there by certain party officials is not always correct. So,
well, and I think it's also a big deal, and we outline this in the article. And again, we cite everything from Robert's Rules throughout the article of our points that clearly illustrates why it's a convention, not a special meeting. But when you look at it, it's a big deal because the interpretation would mean committees, which are made up entirely of appointees of the party chair, would then be limiting what the delegates to the state convention can consider.
right.
And so that would mean this third party would then be usurping the delegates that ultimately have final authority.
Right.
That is a strange stance to take.
Yes, it is. It's in direct conflict
It
to
is
our
in
rules.
direct
And
conflict.
also, I would say it is a continuation of their attempt from what they tried to do at the state committee meeting. They tried to raise the threshold to make it more difficult for the convention delegates to get their work done. And when that failed, now what they're going to try to do is use an obscure part of Robert's Rules that isn't even relevant to conventions as a basis for saying, well, we're just not going to let you, the convention, hear this at all. But again, I would say, and I'm going to read directly from the rules, it says the final authority in all party matters shall rest in the biennial Republican State Convention. It doesn't say the final authority in all party matters that the Rules Committee allows it to be the final shall rest in the biennial convention. It says all matters. And so this attempt not only directly contradicts our own rules, but it's contrary to Robert's Rules.
I guess this is somewhat of a rhetorical question, but I just want to throw it out there. Why do you think leadership is attempting to use Robert's Rules regarding a special meeting rather than a convention?
Well, it's the only one that they can use to try to effectuate their end game, their goal. And I mean, sadly, we see the Democrats doing this too, right?
Yeah.
With Trump. You saw this judge changing the rules to effectuate the outcome that he wanted. And so we're seeing some individuals in party leadership changing the rules to get the result that they want,
Yeah.
which we all know they do not want closed primaries. They know that the people do, and we're coming. And now we have the numbers. So what are they going to do? Oh, you can't consider it at all. Not even, they're not trying to present arguments to convince us that maybe we're wrong or it shouldn't be done. They've tried that and that's failed. So now they're just going to take our ability to even hear it away. That's what Democrats do.
Yeah, I after the Trump verdict yesterday, those are my exact thoughts. And when you look at the national landscape and you saw our president arrested, charged, you can't help but think, okay, this is the rule that we're under. People moving the goalposts, changing the rules. And in our article, again, like we talk about the importance of Robert's rules. We talk about the importance of, why the RPA rules matter. And it's to keep things fair. Organizations adopt rules to keep things fair across the board and for order. And when the goalposts are moved and we're no longer adhering to that, it becomes very dangerous. And it would appear as though, and the question needs to be asked, okay, are we going to follow New York now? Are we going to throw rules out the window to get the end game of what we want? And I think as conservatives, and you can speak on this, as conservatives, as a Republican Party of Arkansas, if we are not willing to pull out the rules and adhere to them, black and white, to the letter, come what may, we're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. Our party is done. Our country is done. As you said, the rules are in place to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to be heard and that matters are conducted in a fair and orderly manner. And so when you have leadership changing, altering the rules, misinterpreting the rules, trying to apply the rules to silence the people, we're not Republicans or conservatives anymore at that point. And we need to just call that out. So we can't claim we believe in the rule of law or we believe in rules and fairness and the voice of the people and then act completely contrary to it. And so I would encourage people to not listen to what is being said, but look at what is being done.
Yeah.
They need to watch the actions because I think they'll find it appalling.
All right, we've talked about leadership holding this opinion regarding the submissions and not hearing them. But let's dive into just briefly what those submissions were. Let's first look at the platform submissions. There were 4 submissions that were recommended by the platform committee. So that means they will move on to the state convention. Those should have been sent to party chairs. Then the party chairs should have sent those to their members, delegates to look over. That would be the draft of the RPA platform. If our viewers haven't looked at that, we have that on the website.
And I think it's important to point out regarding the proposed platform, all of those substantive changes were submissions from grassroots individuals, every one of them, all the substantive ones. There was one change that converted Roe v. Wade to the most recent Dobbs decision, but absent that, everything else was by a grassroots individual. So I applaud them for that.
Yeah, that is great. And I think, and we put in our article, Conduit agrees and supports all of those submissions. But let's look very briefly at the other 3. Again, everything that we're talking about was submitted on time, according to the rules, and should be heard according to the state convention rules, Robert Rules of Order. But again, they're saying that none of these will be heard, but let's look at these 3 timely submissions regarding the platform. First is medical freedom. What are your thoughts on that one?
So medical freedom, that has obviously become an important issue since COVID and how quickly our rights were stripped away in the name of an emergency and love for other people and everything else they could throw out there. So this, and again, the platform is merely a statement of our beliefs. And I think every freedom-loving American, and certainly Republican, can agree that we believe in bodily autonomy. What you put in your body should be a choice. It should not be forced or coerced.
Yeah, and I agree. I couldn't agree with this one more. We conducted countless interviews with people who worked at Walmart or Tyson or JB Hunt. And we talked with others who worked, here in Northwest Arkansas, and they lost their job for not taking the shot. And it was just awful to see how people were treated during COVID. So I think this is a wonderful submission. Talk to us then about the second one, election integrity. What is that one?
Sure. So election integrity, as I think most members of our party agree, we have some serious concerns about how our elections are being conducted. There's absolutely no transparency. Pretty much almost all elections are being conducted by machines, and there's no oversight. We don't even ultimately know who owns the company that is running these machines. So there are just a lot of questions. And even the audits that are done, they're typically done just by running the ballots back through the machine. So it doesn't make a lot of, yes, and then they just say, well, it's good, trust us. Well, no, this is our freedom we're talking about. We're not just going to trust you, but thanks. Thanks for the offer. So this is just saying that we believe we want secure, hand-marked paper ballots. We want to see hand counting. We want the transparency. There's a method out there where there can be a great deal of oversight, and it can be checked by any interested individual later. And so we're just wanting, again, this is a statement saying that we want to bring more transparency and accuracy to our elections.
Okay. And then the third one that was rejected by the platform committee was government transparency. This was a really simple submission. It basically says, we support the Freedom of Information Act.
Can you believe that these were rejected by our party?
Denied.
And then they're saying, oh, and by the way, convention, you can't even consider those.
So
this is outrageous. Yes, so government transparency. It's such an important one, just like the other two. But this came up last September during the special session when there was an effort by our own Republican legislature and governor to gut FOIA. Fortunately, the people rose up, and there was such an outcry that we were able to thwart most of those efforts. But now we're just wanting to put this within our party platform, which it already is to an extent, but to bolster this a little bit more and say that we believe in freedom of information, and we want to preserve our Freedom of Information Act as it was prior to the watering down of the most recent administration.
It's baffling to me that any platform Republican would be against these platform submissions.
Same here. And I heard that they were unanimously rejected by the Rules Committee and Platform Committee. And I think we should touch on this, even though we've discussed it in the past. These Rules and Platform Committee individuals are appointed by our chair. And many of them, as we've discussed, are lobbyists, work for the governor, want to work for the governor, are beholden to the party apparatus for whatever reason. There are very few grassroots people, the people who don't want to run for office, aren't interested in a title or position, really just want to spend time with their kids, but feel like they have this civic duty to be involved to preserve freedom.
And we're going to talk about the makeup of those committees in in a second. But so let's dive into then the rules. So again, there were 7 platform submissions total, 4 moved forward. These 3, medical freedom, election integrity, and government transparency, were denied. And the question remains, will these be heard? June 8th. All right, rules. 7 timely filed submissions, again, currently ordered by the rules chair, not to be heard by the state convention delegates. Let's look at closed primaries. This has been a dividing issue, I think, for several years now between grassroots and elected officials. Talk to us about this issue of closed primaries. It's in our platform. Why is this so hard to get done?
Well, the people obviously want it. The large majority of the grassroots people, which I previously defined as just being the people who aren't interested in titles or holding positions, but care about this country and are involved in their county committees. It is the elected officials that we found that really like the open primaries. And I think that is in large part due to the fact that many of them are not solid conservatives. They're middle of the road. I mean, other states kind of see us as a fake red state for this reason. You know, they have an R behind their name, but they don't really know what government should look like in a free society. And so as a result, they want to get some of those carryovers or some of those Democrats to come over and vote for them. So that's why they want the primaries to remain open. But of course, there are those of us who believe in our platform, and we think that our elected officials should adhere to the platform and not just toe the line.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it has become such a divisive issue. And going back, if you don't mind, to a previous question that you asked about what the convention looks like, the last two have been strikingly different from the ones in the past, I would say from when Doyle was chairing. And I think that difference has come about because we're getting so close to changing the primaries. So historically, individuals could present platform and rules changes from the floor, meaning once you arrived at convention, if you had something you wanted to present, there would typically be a suspension of the rules, and then you could go and present your rule or platform change, and the body can vote on it, whether or not they want to pass it or not. Well, during the 2022 convention, things started to change. So they knew that somebody was going to present a proposal to close the primaries. And so at the time, our parliamentarian was Kevin Jumper. He is an Arkansan. He has been involved with the party for decades. He, from what I understand, was a walking history book. He knew the history of all the conventions back to the Reagan era, and he was the go-to on rules issues. Now, when the 2022 convention was approaching and the party was growing restless and very concerned that the convention might pass closing the primaries, they went to Kevin, and Kevin said, well, we have always allowed submissions from the floor, these proposals to occur from the floor. This is how it has always historically been done, and this is according to Robert's rules. So they ousted him. So they got rid of him, and they brought in a parliamentarian from the RNC. And I think this is a really important point that our people need to know. So the party is bringing in individuals from out of state that are on an approved list by the RNC. And we need to remember that while we are Republicans, the establishment or that institution does not always represent the people. And so let's not forget that and not just defer to them on all these matters. So they have a list of approved parliamentarians. And so the party is going to bring someone in from out of state to be that parliamentarian. Now, I think something important for people to remember is that person is not the final authority on the rules. That person is also very likely going to be biased. We have witnessed this multiple times now. The parliamentarians that they bring in are biased. And so what the parliamentarian is supposed to do is to provide advice or guidance to the chair, and then the chair may choose to follow it or not. But the chair isn't the final authority either. If the people disagree, if the people think that the rules are not being followed, then they have the authority under Robert's rules to raise a point of order. And I would encourage our people to do that. If you think the rules are not, if you have a good basis for believing that the rules are not being followed, then you actually have an obligation to stand up. Because when you know they're not being followed and you're silent, you're then complicit in the breaking of our rules and ultimately the degradation of our entire country, because that is why we're falling apart.
Why do you feel like do you feel like it's hard for people to do that, to call point of order, to say, hey, this is not going, according to our rule? I mean, like, that's a hard thing to do, Jennifer, at times, especially when you look at the makeup of the party right now, where we are. How would you encourage someone to do that?
And I know it's hard. It's never fun, especially if you don't like conflict. And I think that's most of us. But we have to put our morality and our obligation to our kids and to this country above ourselves. And while I know it's uncomfortable, you have to understand that you ran for this position and you now have a duty to fulfill it and to to represent your county and the party's beliefs in an appropriate manner. And that may require you to make a point of order.
Yeah.
And again, you can do it in a very respectful way. Personally, I tell everybody, I've chaired 2 conventions now and multiple meetings, and I tell them I welcome points of order. I'm not perfect. I'm gonna, I study the rules, I study Robert's Rules of Order, but I welcome them. If you think I have, messed up, please tell me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to hear you out. And if we need to pull out our rule books, that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
And so that's unfortunately, that's how I think all leaders should handle them.
Yeah.
I know Sarah Dunklin, I think she handles it the same way. Now, most leaders or most chairs take offense. Like, well, you're not supposed to point out my faults. Well, you're not perfect. None of us are. Let's just go ahead and accept that. Yeah. And let's try to come to an agreement. And the chair's job is just to facilitate a civil and organized discussion. The chair is not supposed to be a king that lords over the entire program and tells everybody how it's going to be. And then when you start seeing that, you no longer have a leader. Okay. And so people need to remember that. And also keep in mind that when you make a point of order, you make a point of information, the other side, and I have witnessed this, they're going to roll their eyes, they're going to treat you like you're silly or like you're dumb or, oh, I can't believe you don't know that. And they're going to be condescending. I've seen this time and time again. And what I always tell our people is do it anyways. Yeah. It's the right thing to do. And more than likely, more than half of the room agrees with you and they just didn't have the courage to say anything.
Exactly.
So just do it anyway.
Well, it reminded me of, and Margot Herzl, she's out of Searcy County, I believe. What meeting was it that she did several points of order
She did.
She was just ignored.
Completely ignored. And that was
ignored.
such a shame. That was December of last year at our state committee meeting. And she had some very valid points of order and she was not even recognized. And everyone should be heard.
Yeah.
And Margot is brilliant with the rules. I think anyone who knows her knows that she is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so if she has a point of order, guess what? I want to hear it.
If you're kind of using the rules to your benefit and bending them a bit, you don't want to call on Margot.
Right. She's going to call you out.
That is accountability and transparency.
Yes.
Hold on right there.
She is black and white and she expects everyone to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And I think
as we all
great
should
to have people like that.
As
right?
we all should. Okay. Yeah. All right. So closed primaries. Again, this is already in our platform. Under state law, it needs to be in our rules. We need to get this in our rules.
And that's what we're hoping to do on June 8th.
Okay, so let's move on and talk about the rest of these rule submissions. Again, all declined, said not to be heard. I just want to keep hammering that point home because it's something that's never been done before regarding our state conventions. Okay, so the non-recommended rules change number 2, and we also have these on our website for you to read if our viewers would like to. This deals with the representatives to our state committee, and it would update the composition of the state committee to reflect the original intent of the rules prior to Republicans gaining a supermajority of elected officials in Arkansas. Break that down for us briefly. What does that mean and why is it important?
Sure. So the state committee, as we mentioned, it is made up largely of our elected officials. And they have those positions. They didn't have to run for them. They have them by virtue of their elected office. So our rules allow them, therefore, to have these seats on the state committee. And so they are conducting business on behalf of the convention during the 2 years that the convention is in recess or has adjourned. So they, and as I pointed out just this last meeting that took place just a couple of weeks ago, that was the body that was trying to restrict the authority of the convention body. So we're seeing that this body that is made up largely of individuals who are elected officials and therefore are more beholden to the government and government officials than they are to the people, are doing things that really run contrary to the people's best interest, I would say. So this proposal was submitted in an attempt to equalize that committee by putting more grassroots individuals on there to so that the people will have more representation in these committees than the elected officials will.
Sounds good to me. All right, not recommended rules change number 3. This one deals with elected rules committee. For the state rules committee to be elected by the congressional district committees and for the rules chairman to be appointed by the state party chair. So how does this change the makeup of that?
Yes, so as we've been talking here, as you see, the Platform and Rules Committee have just decided that we, the people, are not even allowed to consider some of our own proposals. Just unilaterally decided, nope, you don't even get to consider it. You don't even get to hear it. It's not even going to be presented. So what is now being suggested is that those individuals, all of whom were appointed by our RPA chairman, all those positions will now be elected by the people in their respective districts. So there are 4 congressional districts, and when we hold our elections, then we will elect 2 people, I believe it is, to represent us on the Rules Committee and on the Platform Committee. So those individuals will be more focused on facilitating and promoting the will of the people than they will the will of the governor or any other elected official.
Lobbyist or consultant, we have those on our committees.
Mhm.
But just also to mention, the chairman will still be appointed by the state party chair.
Yes, the chairman of those committees will be appointed by the state party
All
chair.
right, let's look at district committee membership. This one says to resolve conflict, it would eliminate extra forms required of elected officials at filing period and to reward those county committee members for their efforts to elect Republicans at the county level.
Yeah. So it's I don't think this one should be controversial at all. We have a lot of people that enjoy going to these district meetings. Of course, there are a specific number of seats that are available, and the elected officials, countywide elected officials, they will lay claim to those seats by filing specific paperwork. And there have been issues in the past where maybe a chairman or somebody who was assisting with the paperwork didn't give those elected officials the paperwork. And then the elected officials, even though they claim to want to be representing us and know the rules, they then just blame the chairman or anybody else that they didn't have the paperwork, even though they were quite capable of getting it themselves or just writing it on a piece of paper that they wish to have those seats. Anyways, as you can see, there has been confusion. And so in order to alleviate the confusion and to also make sure that the people feel like they have a voice at these district meetings, this rule change was submitted. And something that we noticed was that this time, even though a lot of the elected officials filed their paperwork, they're still not showing up to district meetings. Well, then you could potentially have a quorum issue. And so I think what you're going to see is they're not going to show up. They don't want to participate. And the whole reason why they were given those seats was because in the past, they wouldn't show up. As a matter of fact, the first couple of years that I was involved in the party, I hardly saw any elected officials at district meetings. But once they felt like they were being taken away and given to grassroots people, all of a sudden they wanted them. But as I said, even though they filed those paperwork and we've had multiple district meetings, they're still not showing up.
Interesting.
So this rule change will allow the grassroots folks to have, there will be more seats available on the district committee so that the grassroots people can go, be eligible to vote, and have a voice on the district committee.
All right, and then let's look at the equalization of endorsements. This one's really interesting. This one would prevent statewide constitutional officers and those elected to a federal office from endorsing candidates for positions on the RPA State Executive Committee.
Yeah. So yeah, this one is interesting. And the reason why I say that is because the rules do not allow county chairmen and other members to endorse. Not just are we not allowed to endorse, we're not allowed to show favoritism, which can be interpreted rather broadly when the RPA apparatus wishes to interpret it that way. But other members of our party, elected officials, well, they can certainly endorse whoever they want. So it certainly seems unfair. So what the goal was here was just to make it fair across the board. Either we all should be allowed to endorse or none of us should be allowed to endorse. Let's not say, hey, grassroots folks, you can't endorse, you can't show favoritism, but the establishment can. As we're seeing, there's just clearly this favoritism towards the elected officials with this snide eye towards the people.
This is, and again, in our article, we make note of this, that the party politics is meant to be, it's meant to be the vehicle for the grassroots people, not to elevate those who have any particular special or personal interest.
Right.
Okay, another one that I think people have talked a lot about in the past few weeks, this was referenced in Chairman Joseph's somewhat referenced in his email prior to the state committee meeting. He talked about this proposed rules change, and I don't think that it was accurately portrayed. And it's a state committee to conform to the Republican National Committee. So this deals with the membership, and it would put our RPA membership in line with the majority of Republican parties across the country, as well as putting us in line with the Republican National Convention. And I found it interesting that in his email, Chairman Wood's email, he said that this rules change was divisive. And so help us understand what this rules change is. Very briefly, let's not spend a ton of time on it, but I think that it was mischaracterized a bit. And so just explain it to our viewers and what it is and why it was submitted.
Sure. So this proposed rule change is, again, to make things more fair and to eliminate the conflict of interest that has certainly appeared here. So the Republican National Committee and the majority of states' parties, Republican parties, do not allow the elected officials to just have those automatic seats that I referenced earlier. They're not allowed the automatic seats on the state committee. The state committee, the convention, the party is supposed to be controlled by the people. It's not supposed to be an extension of the government officials, and it's not supposed to be catering to the officials. It's supposed to be catering to the people. And so what this proposed rule change will do is it will allow them to remain members, but it will just say they don't have voting authority, which again, that is how the Republican National Committee is, and that is how the majority of states are. So, and another reason why this is important is not just because we're going to have more uniformity throughout the nation, but also because, as we've seen, the elected officials, there's a conflict of interest there. When they are voting on party matters that ultimately could affect them, there's a clear conflict there. That should be determined by the people who they claim to represent. And also, I mean, this is a tertiary matter, but historically, the government officials don't even show up to these meetings. They show up when the governor tells them to. They show up when someone is saying, hey, your rights might be taken away, which they don't, it's funny, they'll go and take away our rights with FOIA, and we're supposed to be quiet. But, we say, hey, we don't want you voting in party matters. And all of a sudden, things are crazy and it's divisive.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that it was leveraged this way. And I understand the intent, good or bad, why it was, and it was to drum up support at state committee. But again, I was talking to someone that lives in Louisiana, has been heavily involved in the party there for decades. And the comment was, we have never allowed this to happen. Our Louisiana Republican Party has never allowed elected officials to have voting rights at the state committee meeting because they would then be considered dual office holders. One, just because, that would be an automatic vote, and they're not elected. People don't go to the ballot box and then say, oh, I'm going to vote for Jennifer Lancaster to represent me at the state committee meeting. So one, they were considered a dual office holder, but then two, even though we say that we're a supermajority and we have, we don't have platform Republicans.
Right.
And at best, we may have half of those who will vote with the platform accordingly. And then you have the other half who will, if even that.
You're being very
I'm sorry, I'm like, she doesn't agree with that.
No.
But okay, let's just say 64, or I don't even know what it would be, but then you're going to have a large majority of those who, because we see their voting record, they're not going to adhere to the platform. So why on earth would we allow them to then show up at our state committee meeting and vote for us, on behalf of us and have an automatic vote. They are going to be beholden to special interest groups,
Right.
they're lobbyists, they're consultants. If your consultant is one of the ones who is pushing, doing away with do not recommend, and that could affect your race, are you going to vote in favor of that or against it? I mean, these are no-brainer issues, and I know we said we'd only spend a few minutes on it, but it's not divisive.
No.
Again, like you said, it brings conformity to our state party
And fairness.
Yeah. And my question would be, well, then is the RNC, is the Republican National Committee divisive?
Oh, I think that's a question you should ask Mr. Wood.
Okay. Well, we've invited him on several times. I'll let you know when that happens. Okay, let's move to the one resolution that it was filed. Again, this resolution rejected. And I think this one's really interesting as well. As we've been talking about this, the overarching theme is bringing the people in, making sure that their voice is a voice that has the power.
Yeah.
Not elected officials, not consultants, not lobbyists, not any of those beholden to the governor's office. It is we, the people. And so let's look at this rejected resolution. This was the only one that was filed, and it deals with the committees, the Platform and Resolutions Committee chairs, and who can serve and who cannot serve. So tell us about this one.
Yes, this is a great resolution. It was drafted by John Mark Huckabee, the governor's brother, and it was passed, overwhelmingly passed by the 1st and 2nd congressional districts, and that's why it was submitted. This one is saying that the individuals who serve on the Platform and Rules committees, the very committees that are telling the convention delegates that they are not allowed to hear certain things, that those members of those committees have to be, they can't be lobbyists, they can't be special interest groups, they can't be on the governor's payroll, they can't be individuals who work in state government, I believe. So it's a number of things, and it really is just about restoring that power and that authority back to the grassroots people, which is ultimately what we're doing. We just want that power to be handed back to the people.
Yeah. Were you surprised that this was rejected?
Sadly, no.
Yeah. Again, I think as we look at all of these, and we look to June 8th, I think at this point, Conduit has also written about this. A win would be for these to be heard, for these to say, you know what, this is what is right, and we know that this is right. This is what the rules say. And our hope is that the party chair and the rules and platform chairs look at this and revisit the Robert Rules of Order again and make their decision accordingly to what the rules say. And I think that would, and again, we've talked about this, that email was submitted in asking for, for it to be looked at again. It's been silence for over a week now. But what do you hope to come out of this, and kind of what we've talked about a lot, but what is your hope?
Well, my hope is just that the people will be afforded the opportunity to hear these issues that are so important to them. This opportunity only comes along once every 2 years. And if all of the power flows from this body, the state delegates, we the people, then who is some committee to tell us what we can and can't hear? Allow the people to consider it, to hear it, to debate it, and then to cast their vote. And if it fails, if they fail, they fail. But at least the people had an opportunity to hear them. When you start having these bodies start taking away the opportunity to even hear them, that's inching very close towards tyranny. Very close. So I want to encourage the people that, I know it's uncomfortable. Trust me, I know. Sometimes people think I just get up and, I'm an attorney and it's so easy. If you look at my hands, I'm probably shaking. But we still have to stand up. We have to speak out, or we're going to lose our country. And all you have to do is look around and you can see that we're losing it very quickly. But our founding fathers gave us a gift in the way that they structured our government, and we can take it back. The question is, are we going to? But it's going to require people to start speaking up, speaking out, and calling out friends or foes who are violating the rules. And is it going to be uncomfortable? Yes, but remember, you're doing it for God. You're doing it for this country. You're doing it for your children.
Mhm.
You're not doing it for yourself. And when you can put your own self-interest aside, that's when we're really going to start making progress moving forward.
Thank you so much for coming in. Always just really appreciate your insight and depth of knowledge into all of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having
And
me.
look forward to seeing you June 8th.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.